Guy in a dark pickup truck ambushes me on my walk home. This happened back in early 2015. I was then a 19-year-old guy living in a rather bad area of Portland, Oregon. Even though there were occasionally some belligerent homeless people and drug addicts, violent muggings very rare and most of the city felt very safe, even at night. One of my best friends turned 21 and we decided to go bar hopping and then go clubbing. I was in a group of about a dozen other people and 3 of which were my roommates. Unfortunately for me, I was the only one in my group who was either under the legal drinking age or did not have a fake ID card. This meant that I was unable to enter the bar. However, to my luck, there was a nice Mediterranean restaurant right across the street from the bar which I ended up going to. I stayed there for more than an hour and then I was ready to leave. I've done that walk many times, even at night, so I was never scared. Until this night, of course. From my apartment, my roommates took an Uber to the bar. This meant I would have to walk back since I didn't have Uber and my phone battery was running low. The distance back to my apartment was about 3 miles. The time was already close to midnight and I would be reaching my apartment at around 1 a.m. I decided to walk the distance anyway since I haven't been at the gym and thought this would be a good exercise. I begin my walk and passed by lots of drunks. Even though some of the drunks would shout things at me, I never felt unsafe or threatened by them, so I was okay. However, the last mile to my apartment was through a darkly lit park that can be scary at night. Not because of any crime but because there is only one street light in that stretch of road. I reached this somewhat creepy area at around 12:30. As I descend down the dark and narrow street, I notice a black Chevy Silverado speed past me and slow down once he passes me. The truck almost comes to a stop but then decides to drive ahead. I begin to shrug it off at first. However, this is where things start to get creepy. After I walk nearly a quarter mile forwards, the Chevy Silverado comes down the opposite direction and does the same thing. When the truck slows down and almost comes to a halt, I begin to panic but not openly show it. I pretend to ignore the vehicle but my instincts tell me something is not right. The truck then starts to proceed but this time, I cannot keep calm. I was not in the middle of a dark and isolated park with no street lights and there likely won't be a single person in sight. After I walk about 500 feet more, I begin to look in horror as the same fucking pickup truck comes flying towards me and puts a sudden brake about 100 feet behind me. One man, around twice my age and bald, opens the passenger door and comes out of his truck carrying what looked like a hockey club. I look behind and lock eye contact with him. He gives me the most haunting and sinister look I've seen from a real person. He begins to yell, "Get the fuck out of my sight or I'll fuck you up, mudslime." I'm of Indian origin and have brown skin, and mudslime was a racial slur directed towards Muslims. As I was planning my escape, I remember how there was a wooded area between the park and my apartment. Where I was, can cut across the park and go through some woods. Then right across the woods was my apartment. This was smart because I have taken that shortcut during the day and the truck will not be able to cut through the woods. Just as I ran towards those woods, I heard another yelling in the distance. "Fuck off, asshole!" yelled another large guy walking on the opposite direction of the sidewalk I was. I then see another large man walking his German Shepherd towards me. After there, the truck driver then started running at us with his hockey club and I made a run for it. I dart towards the woods. Fortunately, the truck driver decides not to chase us and gets back in his truck. I reach my apartment 5 minutes later. At the parking lot of my apartment, I happen to see the guy walking his dog. He looked like a roughed-up bodybuilder, so I was also a little afraid of him too. However, we had a pleasant conversation. I begin to head up to my apartment and look at my apartment window. To my disgust and horror, I see the black Chevy Silverado drive by my apartment and then leave. My friends came back home close to 3 in the morning, just after I went to bed that night. Thankfully, I never saw that creep again and I moved out of that apartment a few months later. After this incident, I avoid walking alone in dark spots and isolated areas at night. To that stalker driving a black pickup truck, let's not meet. The time a raging customer stalked me in his truck, I, 24F, at the time was 21F, I lived in a larger small city in the Midwest. At the time I had no car, a bicycle, and hardly enough money for the public buses. I worked at a retail battery, lighting, and repair store. I worked full-time, and only lived a little over a mile from my job. Since I was a female in a male-dominated field, I was often used to targeted abuse from men that thought that they knew better. Many times I stood my ground and flaunted my knowledge in subjects that these men couldn't grasp. Because of my willingness to learn and my close proximity to work, I often worked all sorts of hours, mostly by myself. This time I wasn't the person closing, and had a co-worker, Joey, 22M, who came in for a part-time shift after he wrapped up classes at the local college. We had a close friendship, and we often stood up for each other, and stood in when we were flustered, or needed to go to the bathroom in the back. Joey received a phone call for a possible repair on a smartphone, possibly LG, low-tier phone though, and he wasn't 100% sure if it was a phone that we could repair. He asked the young female caller to stop by for a consult. She had quickly agreed, and said that she would stop by at around 5:30 p.m. This was a night that I was supposed to get done at 6 p.m. and catch the bus at 6:12. It was a windy, drizzly, early fall night. I remember this because I had my bike with, and it became my anchor that night. A little before 6 p.m. this frantic, terrified, bawling 19 to 20-something-year-old woman came into our tiny shop. I was at the counter, switching out aging price tags and general store maintenance. I looked up at her, confused and willing to help. She looked me deep in the eyes, asking if Joey was here. At the time he was pooping in our tiny bathroom in the back, so I had to step in and help out any customers. I told her that he was currently busy, and that I was willing to help her. She handed me her smashed cheap phone, very timidly. My customer service skills couldn't prepare me for what she was going to say next. She quietly told me that her boyfriend, who was out in his red mini truck in the small front parking lot, had gotten angry, and smashed her phone when she tried to call her sister that afternoon. I took the backing off of the phone, and tried to research the model for any possible screen repair. No results found. I tried to hand her back the destroyed phone, and she pushed it back in my hands with a pleading look. Then the honking commenced. There was this light drizzle outside, so our front glass door was covered in beaded drops, and was slightly fogged over. I couldn't see who was honking out there. I told her again that I couldn't help, and for her to try our cell phone repair competitor down the road. The tears started to really flow down her cheeks, and I was freaked out at this point. She kept throwing glances behind her, and the honking would not stop. I shook with fear and rage at this point. I, myself, was in a domestic abuse situation at the time, and knew what this girl was experiencing. I broke my locked stare at her, and tried to look in our system a second time for a replacement screen. Nothing again. I looked up from our computer, and saw a shadowy figure of a young man pacing in front of the store. I was just happy that the honking stopped, but I was increasingly shooken up. My whole body vibrated with fear, and I whispered across the counter if she needed me to call 911. She slammed her hands down on the counter, and said that I couldn't do that. She begged me not to. At this point Joey came out from the back, and asked me what all of the honking was from. We had a lot of elderly, farmers, lazy, and disabled customers that would honk their horns for us to pick up heavy battery cores from their cars. He thought that it was one of those situations. But with the looks on our faces, he knew something horrifying was happening. The young guy stopped pacing outside, and began banging on our front door. Joey took the girl's phone from my hands, and said for me to go in the back and lock the back employee-only doors. I did what I was told, and grabbed my bag, my bike, and my jacket. I looked at the clock in the back, and it read 6:14. I spent 15 minutes with this girl, both of us feeling like trapped animals. Joey did bodybuilding during his free time, and was a gentle, non-confronting, short but stocky Asian guy. I was a short, obese, kind lady that would respond either of two ways, like a doormat, or ready to stand my ground. I knew that I couldn't fight a customer, and neither could Joey. Not because of physical reasons, we'd lose our jobs, and had no idea what to do. The young guy threw the door open, and the wind kept the door open. He had this manic, hateful look about him. A total predator he was. He was slim, but muscular. Early to mid-20s. And was soaked by the rain. He took the broken phone off the counter, and took the girl in tow. He hurled insults at us, and I gave the girl a pitied look. He slammed the door back shut, and both Joey and I stood in absolute silence. He snapped out of it, and ran to the front door and locked it. I told Joey to call our manager from our store landline, and stood around while he did. I noticed that the guy had moved his truck to directly in front of our door. He was watching us from his truck. Watching us behind the counter as we were on the phone with our manager. I had to leave to get home. The last possible bus came at 6:42, and I couldn't pedal my way home in the weather, and all of the circumstances that had just occurred. The time was around 6:18, and I just needed to cross the busy highway, and down the sidewalk by an eighth of a mile to the nearest bus stop. Joey, the guy, and I played the waiting game. It was 6:23 when the dickhead finally left our parking lot. I told Joey that I would leave at 6:25, so I could arrive at the stop safely. Joey opened the front door, and I threw myself on top of my bike, and pedaled harder than I could ever imagine. Now mind you, our store was an industrial, shopping area at the very edge of town. We worked next to a sub shop. And worked across from a strip mall with a bullseye store, and a local chain grocery store. With other retail stores, and a bank all in that large lot. It started to downpour, and as I tried to pull out of our parking lot straddling my bicycle, I caught a glimpse of the red truck, looping around the sub shop. The highway had dual lanes each way, and I had to play real-life Frogger, if I wanted to make it my destination in one piece. There was a few cars that slowed for me as I hauled ass to the other side of the road. I jumped off of my bike, and threw it on top of the curb. I promptly hopped back on, and tried to pedal off. My front wheel was stuck in the grassy strip, and my right foot had slipped off of the pedal. My shin struck the pedal, and I had to act quickly. I grabbed the frame of my bike and jogged awkwardly to the bus stop. The red truck pulled into the bank parking lot, of which I had just passed. The truck pulled around, and went out through the entrance across from the sub shop, and took the closest lane to me. He went at a crawl, and turned at the red light, so he could circle the main parking lot of the shopping center. There was 3 ways to get into that parking lot, one to the left, one in the center, slightly off to the right across of the sub shop, and the other far to the right next to the grocery store. I stuck to the sidewalks, since it felt safer, and was in front of people. The truck patrolled the parking lot, the hunter stalking its prey. I felt cold, sore, and cornered just like an injured animal. There was a couple of cars that pulled into the left entrance of the parking lot, causing the truck to stop from re-entering the lot again. I almost collapsed in the shitty small bus stop, and I felt my phone buzz. I saw that it read Joey, so I rested my bike on my person to answer the call. Joey told me that he was watching, and even though he had an elderly couple in the store that he was helping, that he wouldn't allow the guy to hurt me. I started to cry. All of this had just gotten to me. The red truck looped around once again, and again. I saw the bus pull up early at 6:39, and I couldn't be happier. I knew the driver, since I used the buses to get around town, errand shopping, and to get to and from work. I had my stupid fucking bike to worry about. I hung up the phone with Joey, putting my phone in my jacket pocket, and strapped down my bike in the rack that was in front of the bus. I struggled since I shook, and my bike was slick from the rain. I got on the bus, and turned to the open bus doors, and saw that the truck took a left at the center entrance of the lot. I could finally let my guard down. I sat at the front of the bus, and my hands shook at trying to get the $1.25 for the fare. The driver said that it was okay, and that I could take my time with the change. I kept my backpack on, and pulled my damn phone from my pocket. Dialing Joey's number, letting him know that I was fine. In under 15 minutes I made it to my apartment safe, but deeply disturbed. I took my bike in, so it wouldn't draw any attention to where I lived. All of this gave me an idea to leave my own domestic abuse situation. A few months later, when COVID took the world by storm, to this day I wonder about that girl, and hope that somebody more daring, and stronger than me called the cops on her abuser. That she had the strength to leave that violent man, for her to write her own story, and to recover from all of it. The white pickup truck. In April of last year, my boyfriend and I were walking home from our friend's house. I had just finished my first year at college, and we wanted to go out and celebrate and have some fun. We live in a rural town, and our friend lived on the far side of it, so our walk was about a half hour or so. I had a drink or two and smoked some of the joint they had rolled. Smoking makes me paranoid, and this night was no different. Anyway, we left at maybe 10 to 11 p.m. and everything was perfectly normal until we got to the end of the long street that would eventually lead to my house. This street always feels so long to walk, like hours can pass and you barely make a dent in the amount of steps made. The street we turned onto this road was maybe 10 blocks from my house. A few minutes after we turned onto this road I felt like something was off, but my boyfriend said that I was stoned and reminded me that I'm a pretty paranoid person to begin with. I really am. This white pickup truck that was parked in front of some house turns on and begins to drive slowly away and will then park. I watched it to see if it was just me being paranoid or not, but it proceeded to stop a couple houses down and sat there with the car still on. As soon as we'd get close it would drive away, parking a little further away. This continued until we got to the end of my street. At this point I kept telling my boyfriend that I'm not paranoid and that this truck was fucking with us, and he had gone quiet. A couple houses down from mine, this truck drives to the end of the street, my house on the corner. There's a dead end right by my house because we live near a river. It stops for a moment at the dead end and proceeds to turn on their high beams and begin to slowly drive towards us. My boyfriend sticks his arm out in front of me, stopping me from walking any further as this truck continues to approach. My house is so close yet so far. This truck slowly drives by us. The windows are tinted but we can see two silhouettes, and because they had blinded us we didn't think to look at the license plates or even the model of the truck. I swear, I felt like that was the night I was going to die or worse. My thoughts hurled around in my mind and I could see that my boyfriend was in the same mindset. My boyfriend, being pretty quick on his feet, waited until the truck disappeared from sight and took my hand before racing to my house and locking the door. He had thought about turning down one of the other streets so we could try to lose them, but he figured he'd wait until they were out of sight to book into my house so they wouldn't see which house we went in. We looked out one of the front windows very carefully and saw this truck come back into view and began to drive around the block, presumably looking for us. This went on for 10 minutes. I called the police to inform them that we had been followed but without the license plates or model. They could only keep their eyes open for suspicious white trucks. I was adamant that these people had to know one of us, if not me, because they drove until they were beside my house. Whether they actually knew it was my house or not I don't know. My boyfriend tries to insist that it was probably a bunch of kids trying to mess with us, but I don't believe that. A few days later, we heard that someone was picked up and was last seen in a white truck. Since this night, there have been stories in the paper and online that people have been grabbing people and these people were trafficked in the area. I'm still seeing reports even today, which prompted this unsettling memory. It makes me wonder if they were some of these people, and if they were they after both of us, or just one of us? Or were they truly just a bunch of assholes trying to mess with us? Either way, I don't care to know. If see a white truck I become on edge. To the people in the white truck, let's not meet. Maniac in a pickup follows me home. Happy Halloween everyone. I thought I'd share this scary story about a time I was nearly killed as a kid for Spooky Day. Also forgive my bad formatting on mobile. This happened when I was around 12 and, at the time, I didn't live in a very good neighborhood. When I got older my mom would tell me that those pops I used to go to sleep to were distant gunshots. In any case, I was out of school for summer, and since I didn't have many friends, I would usually just ride my bike around the neighborhood until I got bored. Then I'd go back home and watch cartoons or draw. As I was riding my bike, I can hear a loud roar of a truck's engine begin to creep up behind me. I look back and see this truck is flying down the road toward me. I try to pull over to the side so it won't hit me, but just as I think he's about to pass me, the truck slows to the speed I'm riding my bike at and gets right up behind me. In confusion, I try to turn over to the other side of the road, thinking maybe he was trying to pull into a house or something, but no. Instead he turns right on my tail again. Freaked out, I try make a U-turn so that I can try to go back home to safety, and as my bike is turning, he revs his engine and hits my bike with a quick push. It was forceful enough to make me lose control of the bike and I collapsed and the truck stopped in front of me. I quickly stood and was about to call out to the driver, "Yo, what the hell?" before I see his face. He's grinning ear to ear like he's playing some sort of sick game with me, and before I say anything, I grab my bike and run with it to the side of his truck before he can push me forward again. I realize as I'm going to the truck side I'd have to run past his driver's side door where he may grab me or something. In a panic I run as fast as I can past the door, which tried to open, but once I ran past it, it shut and I heard the truck begin to move again. I would have thought he'd just keep going, but no, he pulled into a driveway, then backed out so he could turn around and chase me. I got back onto my bike and started pedaling like I had never before. It wasn't hard for this guy to get right back up on me again. All the while I'm crying because I have no idea what this guy is trying to do. After maybe 3 to 4 minutes of this dude just tailing me right up behind me, I finally reach my house where I pull into the driveway and quickly jump off my bike and start booking it inside. I heard the man's truck door close behind me as I shut my front door and saw my mom on the couch. She looked to me confused as I was a tear-filled, shivering mess, and asked me what's wrong. I incoherently began blabbering about this truck and the guy before the guy kicked my front door in and walked into my house. He looked in shock when he saw my mom. And my mom stood stunned for a solid second before she reached under the couch cushion and pulled out her revolver, and aimed it at the guy. "Mom, what the fuck is wrong with you? Get out of my house, guy. Your little bastard dented and scratched my front fender. You're gonna fucking pay for it." He shouts, pointing at me while I'm bawling in fear and gripping my mom tight. "Mom, honey. Call the police." She shouted out to her partner down the hall. "You can either sleep in a hospital bed or a jail cell tonight, your call." Thankfully the guy peaced out and ran back out to his truck. He drove out of our driveway without another word, and my mom sighed as she looked to the damage he did to the front door before coming up to me and comforting me. Still don't know what the guy's intentions were, if it was an insurance scam, or he was gonna break into my home suspecting no one to be there and beat me before stealing whatever he could find. All I do know is that, weird trucker dude, let's not meet again. Truck full of drunken men tried to force me to pull over in the middle of the night on a dark, desolate road. I've been really into this sub lately, and it has inspired me to share a few of my unnerving stories. This happened ages ago, when I was 21. I was a manager for a big box store, but in a town that was an hour drive from me. I lived in a small town and the store was in another small town, both about 12k people each, but in order to promote to manager I had to transfer, which meant doing this drive daily. I had hoped it would be temporary because I dreaded driving this every day, especially late at night because of deer, etc. This was also before cell phones were really the norm. I did have one, but it was one of those ancient bag-style phones, and I had just got it a week or two before. With these phones you had to plug them into your car lighter in order to have them work, and they had a corded attached handset. Anyway, one night I was driving home and it was really late, about 1 a.m. The drive is pretty desolate with houses sporadically throughout mixed with sections of wooded areas. About 20 minutes before my town is a random casino in the middle of BFE. I had just passed this casino and a truck pulled out behind me. I didn't think anything of it, but it was noticeable pretty quickly that they had been drinking because of their erratic driving. Because of this I just figured I'd just put as much room between us as possible. Also to note, as I was going past them they had their headlights on of course and could have easily seen I was a young girl by myself, so the truck comes up behind me at a pretty fast rate of speed and goes to pass me. As they are next to me they swerve a little towards me, and I just think they are much more drunk than I thought and slowed down so they could easily pass. As soon as they got in front of me though they started to slow down. Way down. It got to the point that we were going 20 miles per hour in a 55 miles per hour zone and still slowing down. Like they were trying to stop me. Every time they would get to around 5 miles per hour I would swerve to the opposite lane and give it some gas like I was going to pass, which would then make them temporarily speed up. I could also see a lot better into the truck at this point. It was an extended cab truck with what appeared to be 5 or 6 guys in it. This was during hunting season, so it wasn't out of the norm to see groups of guys acting ridiculous and drunk this time of year, so they were trying to stop me and I didn't want to necessarily pass given what had just happened, but at a certain point I had to. So I go to try and pass the truck, but it blocks me from doing so by getting in the middle of both lanes. I try this a couple times with the same results. Then finally I try to floor it and pass in the truck, but it tries to run me off the road. I immediately get back behind them and am freaking out at this point. I had tried calling 911, but there was a huge area with no coverage yet and I couldn't get through. After what seemed like forever I finally get through to them and they send someone out immediately. As I'm on the phone with them I see car lights in my rear view and am filled with panic. BC, I know this car will inevitably try to pass given we are only going about 30 at this point. Sure as shit the car comes up behind us and goes to pass. And sure as shit the truck actually runs them off the road and into the ditch. I'm telling the 911 dispatcher this and in a full-blown panic. We are getting close to town now though and I can see the first stoplight. I wasn't sure what the truck was going to do because our one lane splits into two and there are gas stations etc. up ahead. Right as we approach the first light I see an officer come in the opposite direction and I start flashing them over and over while telling the dispatcher that I see the officer. The officer makes a U-turn and gets in between me and the truck. He flicks the lights on them to pull them over and they pull into a gas station at the main intersection of our town. I follow into the gas station to assist the police in whatever statements they may need and want to make sure these assholes are actually arrested. That didn't end up being a problem. BC, they refused a breathalyzer, so they were taken to the hospital where a blood alcohol level was obtained. I really wanted to know more but the officer didn't elaborate. I kind of wish I would have called up and followed up on it. They never called me or anything to do anything in court, so I'm guessing they didn't need me, but it also means that they got away with only getting a DUI. I didn't realize this wasn't okay until way later, much too late to have done anything about it. All I know is the officer said they were all 3 sheets to the wind. God only knows what their intent was, but I was terrified to find out. And thank God for that damn bag cell phone. It could have saved my life.